lot easier today to watch the television, listen to the radio, make a phone call into the most remote corner of the earth, and even explore the globe from our computers. But how did we get here? It all started on October the 4th in 1957, when the Soviet Union launched the first artificial satellite into space, called Sputnik 1, a simple device that took measurements of the upper layer of the atmosphere and sent information by radio signals down to the Earth. Although Sputnik remained in orbit only for 3 weeks, it dragged the world into the space age. A week later, on November the 3rd in 1957, the Soviet Union managed to launch Sputnik 2. Everyone was stunned to see that this spacecraft has a pilot on board, a female dog named Laika. The sad part of this was that Laika was never going to be recovered. There was no plan for the dog to land safely on Earth. She was expected to live 10 days in space. However, she died a few hours after being set in space when some of the life support system malfunctioned. It was until the next year, on February the 1st in 1958, when the United States got in the act by launching Explorer, the first USA satellite to orbit Earth. It transmitted valuable new information about the protective magnetic field around Earth, lasting in orbit 12 years after crashing into the ocean. By this time, the Soviet Union and the United States of America were competing. America strikes again with Vanguard 1 on March the 17th in 1958. This was the first space technology to use solar panels instead of batteries that would run out after a few hours. Vanguard 1 proved a new, never-ending supply of data to scientists. Surprisingly, it is still floating out there. The USA, not satisfied with this success, managed to set in space a squirrel monkey named Gordo on December the 13th in 1958. The same way as Laika, the first animal to leave Earth, died when returning. The next year, on May the 28th in 1959, they succeeded to return 2 monkeys, Abel and Baker, sound and safe to Earth. On October the 1st in 1958, a famous American agency was formed, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, better known as NASA. NASA had several goals: to continue to gather data about the Earth's atmosphere and outer space, to test new technologies for launching rockets, and of course, to beat the Russians. September the 12th, 1959, Moon Madness started when Russia launched Lunik 2, carrying instruments for measuring the magnetic fields of the Earth and the Moon. It was the first space technology to land on the Moon, 36 hours after being launched. So far, the Soviet Union has really been winning the space race, even more when they sent the first man into orbit, a man called Yuri Gagarin, on April the 12th in 1961. Gagarin orbited the Earth for about 108 minutes, traveling at over 17,000 miles per hour. America strikes back, sending its first astronaut into space, Alan Shepard, in a mission called Mercury Freedom 7. On May the 5th in 1961, the mission lasted only 16 minutes and did not actually go in complete orbit around Earth. Even though he's seen as an American hero, later he became the 5th person to walk on the Moon. Russia was unstoppable. On June the 16th in 1963, a new mission blasted off from Russia. On board was Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in space. She recorded data about the atmosphere for 3 days before returning safely to Earth. Once more, NASA was being humiliated. The Russians, not happy by sending their first woman in space, they launched their next mission, Voskhod 2, letting one of their cosmonauts, Alexei Leonov, to leave the spaceship attached to it by a leader cord. Alexei stayed out in space for around 12 minutes, showing the world they were ahead of space race.
Looks like Houston down below.
In 1962, President Kennedy issued the challenge that America needed to go to the moon because it would be so hard to do so.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Previous Apollo 11, a series of experiments were carried out in the moon, sending rockets such as Ranger 4, Luna 9, Voyager 1, and Apollos 1, 2, 3, and so forth.
Houston, we see you on the steerable, over. Roger, Eagle, done dot. Roger, how does it look? Eagle has wings. Roger.
Okay, it's go there, Capcom on the hot fire. Okay, all flight controllers going around the horn, gonna go for undocking.
Less than a decade later, on July the 20th, in 1969, the Apollo 11 mission landed on the moon, and Neil Armstrong used the famous words,
"One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind."
20 minutes later, Buzz Aldrin stepped out and became the second man to put his feet on the surface of the moon. Although the US was one step behind Russia through the entire space race, finally beat the Soviet Union, the US was now the center of attention. The eyes of the world were pointed at the moon, and in the US, the impossible has been achieved. Newspapers, anchormen, and people worldwide were talking about the NASA success that led to the end of the space race.
Certainty, or have a reasonable time hack until about an hour before the schedule.
It's July 1975. After nearly 20 years of outdoing each other, America and Russia agreed to do a mission together. The Apollo 18 and Soyuz 19 flight into space and docked with each other.
Let me call to express my very great admiration for this first joint flight.
December the 4th, 1981, the first reusable spacecraft was developed. This new mean of space technology was able to carry satellites into space and return to Earth, landing as an airplane. In April the 4th, in 1983, Challenger blasted off in space, and the 5-day mission was set up, in which astronauts performed repairs of the shuttle for about 4 hours. Later, in 1992, another fixing was performed to a satellite, and this became the longest spacewalk ever. About a billion years after the Soviet Union sent the first woman in space, NASA finally sends its own female astronaut in space on June the 18th in 1983. Her name is Sally Ride. Afterwards, she performed numerous missions, and she became a hero to many. One of the big achievements of the NASA was the successful launching of the Hubble telescope in 1990. This telescope has given us incredible images of events and objects from the far distance. Another great achievement for modern scientists is a project work on mainly by 15 nations. A space station, properly called the International Space Station. Its construction began in 1998 and ended in 2011. Its main goal is to allow scientists to carry out experiments in outer space for about a week or more without having to worry where to stay, what to eat, and where to sleep. Although the space travel has been dominated by the United States and Russia, China gets involved in the early 2000s, sending its first astronaut into space, and later by establishing a lunar exploration program. Space tourism became a reality in 2001 when millionaire and engineer Dennis visited the International Space Station with expedition to space flight. Within 3 years, non-government founded human space flight with a spaceship. Later, we licensed 2 space tourism companies called Virgin Galactic and Space Adventures. Space travel with any of these 2 companies costs around $20 million. It is not possible to send humans to all the planets due to the length of the trip, the cost, and the harsh conditions of the planets. For these reasons, robots and spacecrafts are sent as the only viable alternative. In 2003, NASA sent robots to Mars in order to explore whether life exists or not on this planet. This robot was capable to collect logs, take pictures, and send real-time images down to the Earth, and even dig when necessary. Later, in 2005, a much more sophisticated robot was sent in Mars with similar purposes as Opportunity. Undoubtedly, human beings managing to go beyond there. Most recently, in 2012, NASA successfully launched Curiosity to Mars, still holding the same purpose of collecting samples and the search of life in the red planet. As we speak, there are sophisticated robots and space technologies on their way to distant planets. For instance, New Horizons, which passed from Earth in 2004, but will get in Pluto until 2015, the same way as Cassini towards Saturn. Nowadays, there are a number of space technologies such as spaceships, satellites, specialized robots, telescopes, space shuttles, spacecrafts, flybys, orbiters, and landers. With all these space technologies, space exploration has been pushed beyond there, speeding up the process of space missions.
Day to take a walk.
Machines, dogs, monkeys, and humans were sacrificed to get to the point where we are, and this is not going to end unless there's nothing else to explore. Initially, all space missions were for competition and power. Later, in the 80s, it was shifted to scientific purposes. However, with space race were made medical discoveries and invented hundreds of new technologies we use today. Push your skills to handle the impossible. Always look ahead at your possibilities. compete and show the world what you are capable of. This way, in the near future, you and I might be living outside there.
Crossing tropopause. You are approaching the bottom of the jet stream. Expect possible turbulence and strong wind shears. Felix, you are clear to jump at your own discretion. Speed 620 mph. Mach 1.0. Mach 1.2.